family. By the time you start seeing problems in a child, check the family. In fact, we are encouraged not to treat the child in isolation. If you're going to treat a child, after asking everything from that child and the parents, you must ask the parents questions as well. So for instance, in a dysfunctional home, where a child sees his father beat his mother, or his mother beats his dad, or a child is not listened to, or a child is left with a help. So that's another instructive part. Quite a number of children are left with domestic helps who abuse them and who expose them to different kinds of materials. You'll be surprised what a lot of helps can do. You may also have helps who initiate children into substance. I remember a patient that I had many years ago. It was the gardener that gave him cigarettes to start smoking at age 8. And don't be surprised that that age is dropping fast. So there are also educational disadvantages, because people who don't have access to an education, of course, part of social disadvantage, also turn to different vices that they have seen others engage in. For the adolescents, there's the quote and unquote need to be cool. I just want to be like everybody else. And the need to be cool is the reason why I will tell us this story this evening. It's a real life story, by the way. So when I call it a story, sometime this week, I went to see a colleague of mine who I haven't seen in many years. And when I got there, we started talking about, secondary school mates. And I mentioned one guy. And I said, you remember this guy? And I said, he didn't look like he had a lot of self-confidence then. We don't know what was happening in his home. We don't know if the parents were together. So that's another thing. Homes that are not settled. We don't know if the parents are together. We don't know what was happening at the time. But he just didn't look like a child that had it all together. He didn't look like a child that came from a family where there was a lot of love, a lot of support, and a lot of encouragement. And immediately I mentioned his name. My friend and colleague said, oh, that guy, he went to prison. And I was like, what? Oh, she said, you didn't hear? I said, no, not at all. She said he was sentenced to prison for 19 years. I said, wow. I said, what exactly happened? And she said, well, so number one, he was doing drugs. And number two, when he got to the country that he went to, he became a sexual predator, meaning he started taking advantage of other people by drugging them and doing sexual activities to them. And, I just looked at her and I was like, we went to secondary school with this guy. I mean, look at me now. I may not be at the peak of my career, but I'm proud of where I have come. But imagine that these were people you also went to school with, and they're not doing so well. So different people at different points in their lives will use either substance or expose themselves or get exposed either accidentally or intentionally to materials or habits that are not safe for them. For adolescents want to take risk. And it's the reason why I define the period of adolescence of being that bridge between childhood and adulthood. Adolescents, they want to take risk. They want to, if you say jump, they'll say how high. They want to engage in pleasure-seeking and relieving activities. They want to stay socially connected. They want to be part of a group, the cool gang. I remember when we were growing up, my brother wanted baggy pants because it was the in thing. And I was going to buy it for him when I then read the book by Ben Carson. And Ben Carson said that the reason why people wear baggy pants is because it's a behavior that was learned from prisoners. In prison, people don't wear belts because they don't want them to harm themselves. Unfortunately, people in the real world had begun to think rather that it was a funky way to dress. But of course, not everything an adolescent sees is what they should do. This is why we must guide our adolescents very well. Addiction, again, is a brain disease. Like I said, initially when it starts, it may be for experimental, for pleasure. But as time goes on, what happens is that it changes the way the brain feels and sees things. And the reason why people who take drugs especially become similarly addicted is because the drug or substance that they take or the activities that they engage in rewires their brain. So let me explain this a little, and I will make it as basic as possible. It's the fact that as human beings, we have different things that reward us. So for some people, when you're hungry, what do you want? You want food. And you know how you feel when you just ate, especially when hungry. For some people, it is water. You're thirsty and you drink water. For some, it is to engage in intimacy with your partner. And of course, when all of this is happening, there's a particular part of the brain, a pathway that is called the reward system. Anytime the brain is presented with something that it likes, so is it food? Is it drinks? Is it drugs? Is it porn? Is it gambling? Is it intimacy? A certain hormone, a neurotransmitter, is released in a large amount, and that major neurotransmitter is known as dopamine. Apart from dopamine, there are two other neurotransmitters, serotonin and glutamate. And of course, when the brain has dopamine, it is in what is pretty much known as an overdrive. It comes alive, it is alive, and it just wants more and more of what has been presented to it. But of course, because the adolescent brain is just developing, it is also very malleable. And anything that happens to it can affect it significantly, not just in the now, but even in the future. Apart from pleasure, dopamine also ensures that the individuals are exposed to motivation. And, like I said earlier, it is the reward center, but it is also that center of the brain that is responsible for addiction. So the reward system is involved in the addiction process. And as the individual continues to expose themselves to either a substance of abuse or a habit of abuse, and that habit, like, I've been trying to say, can be gambling, it can be exposure to porn, it can be continuous exposure to internet, it starts to rewire and reprogram the brain. Of course, the brain starts to change. However, not everybody that is exposed to some of these things become addicted to them. And that's because we are all different. Our genetic makeup is different. In some families, there's a predisposition to substance abuse. In some families, the children have learned how to, use gambling as a coping mechanism or mechanism. And of course, at this point, it's important to talk about vulnerability, because it is what makes one break down, but keeps the other one from breaking down. And we are vulnerable based on our genetic makeup, so our genes, our environment, and of course, our age. But the adolescent brain is very, very fragile because it is still growing. And any damage that it starts to take at an early age may affect its functioning in the long run. I have a slide here that says, a friend in need won't make you smoke that weed. And the reason why I've decided to say this today is because as adolescents, we have a lot of friends who say to us, guy, try this thing. It will make you feel all right. It will make you feel high. They may insult you and say, oh, you don't want to take it. You are mama's boy. They will say you're not a what's up G. They will say you don't know what's going on. But the truth is, do you want to use a few minutes of pleasure to spoil a lifetime of opportunities? I always say that anything that you are not proud to do in front of your parents, your siblings, your friends, or even God is the simplest definition of what is known as sin. If you are not able to come out and say, oh, this is what I was doing here. So the fact that all of us have phones in the palms of our hands, we're exposed to information, we're exposed to visuals, we're exposed to information about drugs, we're exposed to information about porn, we're exposed to information about the internet. An average individual, from a research that I heard when I went for a conference, touches their phones at least 200 times every day. Should there be a number of times that we use our phones? If you have an adolescent as a child, and that adolescent, maybe when they're not with their phones, they keep fidgeting, or they forget their phones at home and they have to rush back and say, oh, mommy, I forgot my phone, as if the phone is oxygen support. We need to learn how to put certain measures in place. We need to set restrictions in place for certain things. So for instance, even for adults, pornography is a no. It is not healthy. It impacts negatively on your self-esteem, your confidence level, and may even cause sexual dysfunction in either a child or an adult. For internet, the internet is good, but too much exposure over time to content that is inappropriate can damage us once we expose ourselves to materials that we're not supposed to. If you use the internet, after a while, you should be able to switch it off. Every once in a while, try and turn off your phone. There's some of these things that I will talk about, and I will tell you there is no safe amount. So for substances, I tell adolescents, don't even try. Don't say, I just want to see what it tastes like. I want to see how it makes me feel. Don't. Because once you pop, you may not be able to stop. These things may give pleasure in the short term. But again, like I said, don't waste a lifetime of opportunities just because you're trying to get a bit of pleasure. If as an adolescent, your friends or an elderly person is trying to introduce you into a vice that is not appropriate for your age, please say no by all means. Parents, I hope that we're listening. Let us be our children's best friends. Let them be able to tell us anything and everything. Let's learn how to connect and correct them. The parenting of the 1980s and the 1990s is not the parenting of year 2020. In fact, 21st century parenting is a whole new ball game altogether. We need to learn who our children are. We need to learn who they are under certain circumstances. And we must strive by all means to be their best friend. Let them be able to tell you anything and everything. Let them trust you. Help them become the best versions of themselves. Love them, encourage them, support them, cheer them on. Because if you don't love them at home, trust me, they will go and look for love, support, and acceptance elsewhere. And this is how a number of children are falling prey to some of these addictive tendencies, because we're looking for love in all the wrong places. Your child may look like a little innocent child that doesn't know anything, but encourage them to speak. Let them talk to you. Once in a while, just ask them random questions. Oh, this happened yesterday in the news. What do you think? You're trying to pick their minds. And when they open up to you, don't be too harsh. Be firm, of course, by all means. But please, correct them in and with love. It's also important to state at this point that parents are the best role models any child can see. So as a father or mother, if you're not at your best behavior, your child is looking at you. Children are like sponges. They soak in everything around them. So if you're telling your child, you spend too much time on the phone, you're not reading your books, mother and father, when was the last time you also picked up a book to read? Children emulate what they see. First, what they hear. Let us be the best role models to our children. If we're having problems with our children and we don't know how to handle it, let us seek the services of a therapist to understand our children better. Children are like blank slates. We write on them. What you write on your child today may be the defining moment for that child's life. Be conscious of the friends that your children also make. Who are they? Who are their parents? What are their values? What do they live their lives around? What values drive them? Are your values similar or are they distant? There's some people that cannot be your children's friends because they are not, in quote and unquote, good for them. At home, you must encourage your children to speak to you. Even if you have an elderly person living with you, please listen to your children. Let them be comfortable enough to speak to you. Don't let them scamper into their rooms when they say, dad is back, or mom is back, and they don't want to see you. We need to teach our children a number of skills which will help them get ahead in this generation. On top of that skill is communication. Teach your children to listen to you. Teach your children to speak to you. We must teach them to be creative, to be competent. I'm happy that Fola mentioned emotional intelligence. That's an extremely fantastic skill that children need to learn. We need to teach our children to be able to solve problems. A lot of parents are guilty as they don't let their children do anything. The children want to do this, they'll call the house help, come and do it for him. The children want to do something, they say, don't worry, I'll do it for you. A lot of adults do not know how to solve problems because they let them use their brains. They will make mistakes. But then again, remember, I spoke about the age of industry versus inferiority. Between the ages of 5 and 12, children want to explore. They want to be inventors. They want to write books. I have a 6-year-old son, and he has written up to 10 books. Even though when we open the books, there are scribbles, and he's writing, oh, the dog and something. But you know, one day he came to meet me after writing all those books, and he said, Mom, I want to go and sell my books. And I smiled, and I said, you know what, let's go and look for people to sell the books to. Another parent may have just said, you're just wasting paper, you're wasting paper. If you tell that child off, when he has bigger ideas, he won't come and meet you. We need to teach our children to be assertive, to bear their minds without being rude or without being aggressive, to be able to say no when temptations come. To say no when temptations come and to not necessarily feel like they need to give a reason for saying no. We need to teach our children to be loving and caring. We need to show them love before they learn love. If you don't show your children love, they won't learn love. A child cannot give what he doesn't have. So the home, again, is extremely important. We must show our children the values that our homes are made up of. I like the values of integrity and honesty. We can add a lot more to many of these things, and we can teach our children confidence. Tell your children, you are smart, you are intelligent, you are beautiful, you are handsome. I am proud of you. As an adult, if I looked at you now and I said, Mommy, you're looking so beautiful, or I said to you, Fola, you're looking so beautiful this evening, she will smile, and yes, Fola is smiling. Everybody loves a nice compliment. And of course, when a behavior is repeated. So for instance, I've told Fola that she looks beautiful. If tomorrow I tell Fola she looks beautiful, in fact, before I tell her, Fola would ensure that she shows up looking beautiful. If we tell our children how much we love them, how much we're proud of them, and even though they're struggling, we are there to support them, our children are likely to develop a healthy self-esteem. It's important to teach our children resilience. Things will not always be easy. The prayer is that life is easy, it's rosy, but that's not life. Life has its ups and downs. And of course, we must show our children that even though there may be tough times, we can teach them how to cope even in the face of adversity by looking to their strengths and by using support systems available to them. The last thing I think we need to teach our children is about God. And for me, that's because God is, for me, a big deal. Of course, I'm talking to a varied number of people this evening. So some may believe in God, some may not believe in God. And teaching our children about God is not just about going to the church or going to the mosque. It's about being intentional in the way we live our lives. Treating our neighbors right, being kind to others, being considerate of others in the little things we do. Remember, again, our children are looking at us. Driving and giving somebody right of way, talking to your maids and talking about them nicely. Love is personified in all of these things. We must teach our children to use resources available to them, family, friends, community, and encourage them to read a lot of books. Addictions are real. Addictions are destroying. And I know that a lot of people will look at me now and think that people don't have addiction problems. And I think I must add at this point that by the time you find one addiction in an individual, start looking for others. They don't occur in isolation. So if you find someone who is addicted to pornography, it's likely is addicted to food or addicted to alcohol or addicted to a certain substance or addicted to gambling or the internet. Let's try hard so that it does not even happen. Let's work hard at ensuring that we imbibe the right values into our children. If any of us is struggling with an addiction or has children who appear to be struggling, please, by all means, let us seek help on their behalf. We can pray, but remember again, I said, addiction is not a moral issue. It is a medical disease. And the earlier it is attended to, the better. I would like to close with the words of Fela Durotoye that says that the future is not a time zone that is yet to come. The future is everything that we can be, but have not yet become. The future is now. It's not a time zone. So go ahead. Adolescents, children, this is for you. Go ahead and deliver the future. Because you can, because you must, and because together we will deliver the future. Remember the story I told you about my colleague in secondary school who decided to do drugs, whether it was intentional or it was accidental, started to do drugs. And not only did he do drugs, he ended up in jail. I mean, so look at those two people and look at me here. And I know that my success to where I am is not because of my doing or because my parents did everything that they had to do. It did take a lot of hard work. It took a lot of prayers. And that's why I'm encouraging parents to do all that they can to ensure that children turn out well. Love may seem very simple, but give your child love. Attention may seem very simple. Give your child attention. Praises or affirmations may seem minute, but if children have friends who are urging them on and who love them, who show them love more than you show them at home, rest assured that you are pushing these children out. and that you are pushing them into the arms of people who will teach them what you don't want them to learn, but what may ultimately destroy them if we do not take action. It is important for all of us to identify our roles. So as young adults, as children, put your mind on the prize. Focus on the fact that you want to be the best version of yourself. And be able to look back, and that in future, you want to be able to look back at this for yourself while growing up. You took the best choices, you took the best decisions. As parents, I've said a lot, and I will say more. Please do your part to ensure that your children become the best that they can be. To the environment, and that's what Fola exactly is doing. The environment should set up enabling sessions such as this to allow children and adolescents and even their parents to learn how to ensure that children and adolescents and even parents themselves are the best versions of themselves. And of course, please don't leave out the God factor. It is important to take God along in everything that we do. And even if you don't believe in God or you believe in anything else, please, by all means, ensure that you're intentional and deliberate about everything it is that you do on a daily basis to get the best out of yourself, the best out of your children, and of course, the best from your adolescents. I'd like to thank you very much for being such an attentive audience.
So much, Dr. Abiri. Thanks so much, Dr. Abiri. Thanks so much for an insightful session. As you spoke, a lot of things stayed with me, and I'm just going to recap some of those things that stayed with me. And if you have questions, please can you go to the chat room and ask your questions. Okay. Somebody is saying, yeah, Dr. Abiri, thank you. It was really insightful. All right, so three things, something stayed with me. You clearly said that addiction doesn't start with somebody being uncontrollable, dependent on a substance or whatever it is. It starts with coping. It goes on to uncontrollable craving. No, it goes to compulsion, then it goes to uncontrollable craving. So it's possible that some of our children are in that stage of compulsion, right? So it starts with coping. And sometimes if we parents are also instigate the coping, when we put a child in front of a system, it's our way of coping, with time. Don't let this child disturb me, and things like that. We just choke them up with the TV, gadgets, or the game, and all of that. So it starts with that, but it now goes on to uncontrolled compulsion, where you just feel that you have to. So parents really need to, I want us to remember these three processes and be vulnerable to ourselves, that is, be truthful to ourselves, and know at what point your child is at on any substance, whether internet, porn, or drugs, or all of that. Another question that may be going through parents' mind right now is that how do I start this conversation with my child? Should I wait until my child is in that phase of uncontrollable craving? And I'm going to share my experience. Then I'll let Dr. Abiri, if she wants to add anything to that. Just this conversation right now is a conversation starter. So if your child is listening to this conversation, this is a platform to say that let's talk about this further. Dr. Abiri has shared her own experience as to how she Dr. Abiri has shared her own experience as to how she about a friend, how somebody that they were classmates right now is in the prison. That's a story. You may have a story of maybe somebody telling you that come and smoke this, or something happened in your school. Go on and continue having that conversation with your child. That is something that's outside the conversation. So you're not going to wait until your child says somebody told me to try something. No, It's the more conversations you have about it, the more values you are building around around that topic. So I remember clearly that for me, the first time I spoke about cigarette and all of that with my son was when he was about 6 years old. Um, he had seen somebody, he had actually watched somebody online. There was a particular TV he watched in somebody's house. Abiba, please, your, can you mute yourself? Right. So there was a time, so he had seen it on TV. So there was a time we were walking on the road. We saw somebody smoking. He now said, "Oh, mommy, he just said something about it. He just said something about it." And immediately I took it from there. I went online. I showed them the heart condition of someone that smokes and then how the normal heart condition is. This was when he was 6 years old, and he saw the difference. The person that was the heart of the person that was smoking was very dark, and I told him the consequences of that. And so I remember that clearly after that time, anytime you see somebody smoking, I'll tell him that he will say by himself, he said that, oh my God, this person's lung is getting destroyed or something like that. He will say it himself. So that was a conversation I took advantage of that opportunity and we're able to converse about it. So to parents, they may be wondering, how do I have this conversation? You don't want to wait until your child is going to the university after he or she has seen their peers or their of normalized smoking, substance use, and it's as if they are on a high, they are the coolest people. You don't want to wait until that time and you now start saying, don't tell me anything on share, all and all of that. When for a very long time they have seen these things and it has been normalized. So now is now is the time to have this conversation. If you are here, your child is not here, let them listen to this particular podcast and start the conversation with them. So I would like to ask if you have any other, if there are questions, Dr. Abiri would like to answer. So Dr. Abiri, maybe you just want to add, if a parent is saying that, when shall I start this conversation? Maybe you want to add something to what I said. Thank you.
Over to you, Paula. Okay. So I think a good time, of course, like you said, to start that conversation is once your children start becoming conscious of the environment. It's like saying, when should you start talking to your child about sex education? And as soon as they can speak, start talking to them. Start telling them, this is this, call it what it is. This is your vagina. This is your penis. This is your bum. There are certain areas in your body that nobody should touch. Nobody should also ask you to touch. So that's for sexual education. So if you're telling a child as little as 3, especially because, even children as little as 2.5 or even lesser are prone to abuse. So why don't you just, give them the information? It may look like a load of information, but it's also when, there's a dearth of information is also dangerous. When you see that their curiosity starts to pick. So for instance, at home, I rarely watch TV. So my children are unlikely to watch TV. So when you now start having children who are watching, for instance, music channels, where, for instance, there's a lot of nudity, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of language, there's use of substance, they may ask you questions. I remember that my son asked me one day, why is that person smoking? And I was like, so another thing I would encourage parents to do is sometimes let them answer their own questions. So for instance, if a child says to you, why is that person smoking? And then you just say, well, what do you think about smoking? A child may say, well, I don't know. Another child may say, well, it makes us cough. Another child may say, oh, it smells funny. Or another child may say, oh, it makes them look cool. You're indirectly getting into their mind to understand exactly, picking their brain to understand how exactly it is they see and perceive this individual. And then you can then use that as a leverage to teach them what you know. You may want to buy them material. It's never too young to start teaching children about certain things with educational material. So for instance, you may want to show them even pictures that, oh, see, this is a healthy lung. This is a diseased lung. and you ask them, which one do you think looks better? But that this is what happens when people continue to use this kind of substance. And then, of course, some of them may ask you, is it that these substances don't make people feel good? And that's a trick question when a child asks you that question. It's not as if people may not feel a certain kind of way when they use substances, but is it worth putting everything on the table for? No. And that's why you should have those conversations with them. Those conversations where you tell them it is dangerous. It may seem like it is good. I mean, so for instance, a simple way to teach them about those kind of conversations, maybe, for instance, you could go to the Bible and say, remember Adam and Eve and in the garden where they ate. So that's me just trying to use an example of something that looked like it was good in that short time, gratifying in that short time, that they couldn't control their urges for, but they lost all that they were promised and were locked out of, the garden. So for instance, part of what you also need to teach them is that using substance may give you an initial high. It may make you feel good for a few minutes, but the dangers that are associated with its use are not worth experimenting. It may make you feel and look cool to your friends, but is it worth you losing all the opportunities or even putting yourself at risk for other behavior? No. Because when people are under the influence of substance, for instance, they can't make good judgments. So please, parents, answer the questions that adolescents ask you, because if you don't answer them, somebody else will answer. The internet is at their fingertips, so they'll type. And it is what they find that they will believe. If you don't tell them, their friends will tell them. So please, by all means, let us respond to them when they ask questions of us. Thank you.
So you have some questions that I'm sending to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can take those questions. You can read them, then answer those questions if we can.
All right, so the first one says gaming seems to be the order of the day for many children now, especially with the new normal of online schooling. How do we enforce self-control even when we have tried putting all other types of control? So I think a good thing that we must teach our children is teaching them about delayed gratification. There are things that will feel good if you do it now, but there are things that will feel better if you wait. There's nothing wrong with letting them play games every now and then, but put a timeline to it. Let them have a structure, and children and even adults do better with structure. So when my children wake up in the morning, I get them ready for online school. I set them up and then I leave them with my mom at home. They do online school from 9 to 2. When they're done, in between they have breaks. When they're done at 2, they have an hour break and then they start reading a book. Sometimes they may be able to go out to either ride their bicycles or do something. Another type of exposure. Like somebody said today, it's unfortunate that the environments that we're living in were unintentionally raising children that may be seen as autistic when you compare them to how we grew up. I mean, we grew up, I remember when I was growing up, our compound was so big. We'll plant corn, we'll plant oranges. When my animals died, I'll bury them. A lot of children don't have those experiences anymore. So we must be intentional in ensuring that they have a holistic experience. Let them go out. So after my children come back from either cycling or doing paper craft at home, the teacher comes on. And in the evening, I allow them to play their game. There must be timing, and children must know that there are restrictions to this thing. So for instance, you may want to put in checks on their laptops to find out what they're looking at. You may want to put parental restrictions so that they don't go to certain sites. And you may also want to discuss, okay, so you're watching this show now. What do you like about the show? I have a 9-year-old daughter who says to me, oh, I like Henry Danger. I have a crush on Henry. So Henry Danger is a Nickelodeon character. And she said, oh, I have a crush on Nickelodeon. And I'm looking at her like, oh my God. But on the day she told me, I had to ask her, so what's a crush?
What is crush?
She said, oh, I really do. I like him and I fancy him. And I said, that's fantastic. But don't start catching feelings. Don't let it become emotional. Let them see reason beyond, oh, is handsome, is this, is he intelligent? Yes. Are there things I want to learn and emulate from him? Yes. So you see, children will ask you questions in different ways. But I think that if we put structures and schedules in place and certain restrictions and set barriers, we're likely to do well, even when our children want to game. So there's nothing wrong with gaming, but there must be control. Remember, they say that power is nothing without control.
Can I
Second question? Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the fallouts, or that one of the things that parents do, is that they don't explain the process. They don't explain the process to their children. So if you're giving your child structure, for instance, or you're saying that you're going to you're going to game for 1 hour, we just give it as instructions. We don't explain why that instruction is, and we lose the opportunity to teach value. We lose the opportunity to engage, to put the right things in their minds. I want you to remember that the why, the why that our children ask us, the answers we give to those questions is the opportunity where the value can be passed across. So you just find that some children know that, oh, I only game or only play games for 1 hour. They don't know why it's only for 1 hour. They don't even know why they are cycling, for instance, or why they're going for sports. So they just do it because it's an instruction. As your children go older, you need to start telling them that this is why you do this. That is actually where values are communicated. So that's very important. So if your child is into gaming, for instance, don't just say you are just allowed only 2 hours. You need to explain to them. You can even explain to them what how addiction affects their mind, and how some of their other skills become docile, right? Explain to them the advantages of gaming, why it's good, and why you're allowing them, apart from entertainment, their eye coordination and all of those things. But by all means, why they need to, it also has to be restricted. So that's a skill parents need to engage. While you're giving the instruction, explain the values and your why around the instructions you are giving. Dr. Kodima.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So let me take the second question. And this second question says, how do you deal with issues where an elder child is already exposed to all these vices so that they wouldn't influence the others negatively? And the first thing I would say to you is, please, by all means, seek help for that child. You didn't state the vices, but for you to have used the word vice, it means that it's becoming problematic. We often say in practice that if a child is using substances, if a child is gaming, or having problems gambling, or a child is using pornography, all of those are like fruits on a tree. They are symptoms of a bigger problem underneath. And that bigger problem may actually be in the root. So for that one child, instead of trying to help the others, and there's nothing wrong with helping the others, but if you allow that one to continue to go astray, chances are, no matter how you try to secure those other ones left behind, that one, how to say one bad apple can spoil everything else. You need to take that one apple out and seek help for that one apple. You need to find out why that child is showing problematic behavior. Let the child see a therapist. The things a parent may not be able to find, a therapist will be able to find in a child. Please let that child seek professional help. It's never too late. Let that child seek help, please, by all means. It's the only way you can save the others. Otherwise, if you save the others and leave the other one, that one child can affect all others, because all other children, they're seeing, they're looking, they can hear, they can feel. And as long as that vice continues, no matter how hard you try to help that other one child, it's unlikely to be, it's unlikely to be a fruitful effort. So please, let's not neglect that one child that appears to have any vice, but let us help that child and help the child to become better by all means. So that's what I would say to that question. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So the third question I have here, and it says, how do you wean off a child who is already exposed sexually? What form of therapy works well in those situations? And this question is extremely close to my heart, because this is me just wondering, how did this child even get exposed? Was it accidental? Was it intentional? Was this child abused? We don't know what it is. But whatever it is, this child needs help. Again, a professional will be able to help this child. And I usually advocate that it is better that the child is seen by a team of professionals specific for children. So a psychiatrist, a psychologist are best suited to attend to this child. This child needs to talk to someone in an environment that is free of judgment and bias, and where there's a lot of love and understanding. Unfortunately, a parent may not be able to cope effectively with the information that they've gotten, and may not even have the requisite skills to help the child. So, the parent is asking, what therapy will help this child? And the truth is, I may not even be able to tell you this is the specific therapy that will help this child until we conduct a personal, assessment of this child and find out what exactly the child's problems are. Again, all of the things that we see are symptoms of a bigger problem lurking in the dark. And the earlier we attend to it, the better. If you don't attend to a child who is having sexual problems early, it may affect the child's relationships development as the child grows older. So please, let's pay attention to whatever troubling issues or difficulties we may find in our children or in our adolescents. Let's not be in denial, because a lot of parents may just say, no, I reject it. It's not my portion. It can't happen to me. No, this is the devil. Well, pray by all means, yes, but also seek professional help and support for that child, because there are many things you may not be able to find out. You may need help and support and professionalism to help you get it out of that child. The child stands a good opportunity to be able to become the best that they can be. Please, by all means, let us support and help our children. Thank you. Paula, I don't know if you'd like to add anything.
I think it's important to re-echo what you said about words. So a lot of times, even as I engage parents and, as parents try to fix some of these problems, we are geared towards fixing the fruits, the outshoots, and we just forget that sometimes the underlying roots in it. Addiction, for instance, is something that is, just within inborn, and like you said, sometimes there are so many underlying factors which are roots underneath. So for parents that find themselves at this, sometimes it's easy for you to just trace it to say that this was accidental, and you remove the gadget from the child's mind, but you don't even know what has gone on, what's going on inside. I remember a particular parent calling me that the child got exposed to illicit content online, and the child was just, the parent didn't even know. How she knew was the girl came to her room and started crying, and she was like, whenever she's sitting down, she just sees the pictures in her mind, in her mind, in her mind. So I think that we should take the stretch and seek proper help, so that we can for sure say that um, some of these things that could be root factors are already nailed up so that the children really, really can be safe. I think that's all we'll say. Then we have the last question here, Dr. Gbonjubola.
Yeah. So the last question says, I'm trying to pull it up.
Are you seeing it?
Okay. Yes, I have. So the last question says, are there good addictions? And initially when I looked at it, I'm like, okay. Even the word addiction sometimes connotes negativity. So is there anything that seems like a good addiction? And the truth is, there are different things that we do at different times that we enjoy. And quite often, we've often been told that we should learn to do things in moderation. But are there good addictions? If there's something that you like and it is healthy to you and to your body, I would say do it in moderation. For me, moderation is key. Moderation is key. It is not compulsive. So as long as it is the opposite of everything that
uncontrollable craving.
Yeah.
So when you is a craving good or bad, and it becomes uncontrollable. Hello, somebody.
Exactly.
Another person is the slave.
Yeah. So as long as you can put a timeline on it, you enjoy it, but you're also able to put a control on it. And whatever it is that you're doing is not causing any detrimental effect to you. So either it is an activity or a substance. What I would recommend is whatever it is you need to do in moderation. And I think I'll just end up with, what the Bible says, that whatsoever you do, whether you eat or you drink, do it to the glory of God. By the time you start doing something and you're asking yourself, is this right? What if people hear? What if they see me? And you're, beginning to second guess yourself. It may just then mean that you were not even supposed to do it in the first place. So please, by all means, live, love, laugh, enjoy life, but remember to do all things in moderation. So somebody is asking a question here that the doctor mentioned that when there is an addiction, they need help. Definitely. Please, can you list the avenues through which these children can be assisted and supported? So
there are two questions there.
Yes, I will come to the second one as well. So I had when Fola was saying that a parent found out that the child had seen some material that they were not exposed to. If the child had probably not been previously educated about what not to look at, the child may not know what to do. And the child may just continue to look at, the material. But for instance, there are times there's something, maybe there's a movie title that shows up and my children are like, oh, mommy, let's watch that. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not for kids. And they say, what do you mean by it's not for kids? I'll say, well, first of all, see, there's an age rating there. So you must always answer their question. There's an age rating there. It says 18. Can you see V, N, L? There's violence, there's nudity, and there's strong language that is not good for you. So please, by all means, do not watch any of these things. I remember a few years ago, I had someone who was helping me with my kids when I wasn't home. And I put movies on a flash drive. And there was a movie I put on it. And it wasn't a rated movie or anything. It just wasn't content that a child should have watched. I think there was drugs. It was a story. It was a series about drugs. And, when I was leaving, I told the person that I left with my daughter then that, you see, this content is not for children. Don't watch it. Would you believe that it must have been like 2 years after the young lady left that my daughter said to me one day, Mom, you know that thing that you told us not to watch? Do you know that this person opened it? So if I did not mention there then that this is not appropriate for you to watch. She wouldn't have known that you're not supposed to do this. And even when she saw somebody else do it, she was quick. Well, maybe not quick, 2 years is a long time. But she said to me that day that I told her that mommy said we shouldn't watch this. And after I told her that, she put it off. So with that, we need to educate our children, give them information, answer their questions. They are so curious these days, they can literally kill you with questions. But if you don't answer those questions, rest assured that a device or another individual who is not even well equipped to help them will be able to answer those questions for them. So please talk to them and answer their questions. If they've been exposed to materials or to habits that are unhelpful for them, you may want to refer them to a therapist. Take children who have been exposed indiscriminately to a therapist. There are therapists that can help you deal with children, and because a lot of these behaviors are learned, there are behavioral interventions that you would help to teach your children. They've learned, they will unlearn, and then they will relearn. So you will just replace the patterns that you don't want and put the patterns that are healthy and adaptive in their mind. It may take a while, but all of this is possible and achievable. So the last question here says, the doctor also mentioned that where there is one addiction, one should look out for other types of addictions. Can you please expatiate on that? And basically what I said is, you know how they describe hypertension and diabetes as occurring like hand in glove? Where you find one, you are likely to find another. That's what happens with addictions as well. With addictions, if you have one addiction, after a while, that individual may not feel fulfilled with that one addiction anymore. And they then start to look out for other addictions that would fulfill and fuel their desires. So if it was initially food, so some people are addicted to food and they will keep eating to fuel their emotions. So in this kind of people, they don't eat to feed their bodies. They're eating to fuel their emotions. After a while, if the food doesn't quite meet their needs anymore, what we find is that they may then move to something else. Maybe alcohol, maybe substances, other substances of abuse, maybe gambling. And the interesting thing to also know is that, you know, when you have children between 0 to 3 years old, the source of pleasure is the mouth. If a child is not adequately fed when they're young, or they don't negotiate that oral phase, it's called the oral phase, well, maybe their needs are not well met, they're wet and people leave them for a long time, they're hungry, nobody attends to them. If they don't negotiate that oral phase well, they're the kinds of people that always want to put something in their mouth. So if it's not food, it's alcohol. If it's not alcohol, it's another substance. So please, let's try not to even let one addiction come in. If there's one addiction that you have identified, get help early. Don't be in denial. Don't be caught sleeping, because this child will continue to grow and develop. And aside that one addiction, they occur in clusters. They will start to bring other addictions to satisfy and fulfill the quote unquote needs that the child or the adolescent has at the time. Thank you very much. That was the last question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. If there are other questions, we'll share Dr. Abiri's handle with you. And like I said, she is a psychiatrist consultant. She's the CEO of. Dr. Abiri, you want to talk about your practitioner?
Okay. Okay. Well, so I manage a private psychiatric facility in Lagos, and the private psychiatric facility is called Tranquil and Quest. Behavioral Health Limited. Tranquil and Quest is a private psychiatric facility where we cater to mental health conditions and substance abuse and other addictions. We do rehabilitation for those individuals. We cater to children, adolescents, young adults, old adults, and even people in the elderly. And part of what we also do is what is known as the Employee Assistance Program, where we provide support for employees, yes, in their offices where they work. Basically, that's what we do at Tranquil and Quest. And we're available, online on Instagram at TQ Nigeria. Our website is www.tranquilandquest.com.ng. We're ready and available to receive you and your inquiries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Abiri, I know that you've been so helpful. I have a teenager that I know she's a teenager. She's asking questions. Some of the questions she's been asking, she's asked, "How do you know you're addicted?" And I feel that we need to have a session for teenagers. I think we need to have a session for teenagers. I think so. So, how do you know you're addicted? Uncontrollable craving. But I think Dr. Abiri wants to say something about that.
Well, so there are certain criteria that an individual must fulfill for them to say that they're addicted or dependent on a particular lifestyle or a substance. And when you talk about addiction, it's because you know that there are negative consequences to that action. So whether it is the use of a substance or a behavior that the individual is indulging in, addiction connotes when that individual continuously craves that substance or the habit. There's an uncontrollable desire to engage in it. The individual finds that the amount of substance or time or that they use to engage in it initially has to be increased over time. The individual continues to engage in either the use of the substance or the activity despite its detrimental effects. And the detrimental effects, of course, start to affect the individual in their personal, occupational lives and their social functioning as well. So those are some of the criteria that we see, and we say that this individual is dependent or addicted to a substance or to a particular, addiction as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to everyone on the call. Thank you, Dr. Abiri. Thank you so much for always being here for us. May God blesses the work of your hands.
Amen.
Take you to the height of your dream and it's planned for you as well. You will not be caught away in Jesus' name. Like I said before, Brighter Girls, we have programs for your teenagers, for preteens as well. It's very important for you, please. If there's something amazing about engaging parents. But you see, the moment your child begins to tilt to being a teenager, the tools have to be in their hands. A lot of times, a lot of parents have not engaged their children enough, and there's a parenting is a different parenting phase once you begin to parent an adolescent. And one of the strategy you can thrive on, or you can count on, or tilt to, is when you begin to put the conversation, when you begin to put the tools in the hands of the teenagers themselves, and that's what we do at Brighter Girls. So we engage with young people and we put the tools in their hands. We create a safe space where they can ask questions, where they can engage, and where they can also meet with mentors and professionals so that they have the requisite information to master their adolescent years and be prepared for life. And so I'm enjoying us to take advantage of some of the programs we have at Brighter Girls. I will be sharing some of them with you. Please do the needful and please join this program. It's amazing, it's life-changing. You can guarantee that your teenager will be getting the best support and the best tools for this phase of their life. So we call it a day, and I want to say thank you so much. We'll be sending the recording to you. Please watch it again and share with your community, your people around you, so that together we can raise children that are whole, we can raise a society, we can build a society that is healthy for every one of us. So thank you all so much, Dr. Abiri. Thank you so much again. I celebrate you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you all
Yeah.
too for listening. Have a beautiful week ahead.
All right then. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.